Join us in Miami for Code Remix Summit. Attend hands-on sessions with some of the best industry experts. Looking for immediate ROI by attending? Bring a relevant business case and work directly on solutions affecting your organization in the hack track. Bring your problem, bring your laptop, and walk away with work done for your boss. Register today for Code Remix Summit.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Code Remix Weekly. With you here with your regular host, my name is Tim Twick, and with me is Sam.
Good to see you, Tim. How you been?
Good to see you. I just fine. Yeah, it's I was out 2 weeks, I think, for one for snowboarding, one to just try to catch up on things.
Yeah. That snowboarding trip, you posted some really nice pictures of that. Seems like you got some clear skies and powdery slopes.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah. So.
And those were the Swiss Alps or the French Alps? Some kind of Alps?
A mixture of both. Yeah. So we had a day going from France into Switzerland and back again. And just a really nice tour. So.
All right. That sounds fun. Yeah, I've gotten to do a little bit of skiing here in Washington, although not as much in recent years. But your trip made me wanna go again. So yeah.
I'll be sure to make you jealous again in 2 weeks when I'm in Sweden doing the same.
All right, that's cool.
So yeah, no, looking forward to that. And then of course, thank you. You did a wonderful live coding session 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I'm pleased that you chose to tune in to see it. Although whether you were and that you liked what I did. Although I don't know if maybe you were looking for Schadenfreude to see if I would bungle it and be like, he needs Tim's help. This is a mess without me.
No, you did very well. Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, Tim.
So as always, we're going to take you through some of the things new in the past week or so. And for that, I'm going to share a couple quick slides with you. And I'll share the links in the comments as well. If you want to read things at your own leisure, then be sure to do so. Now, the first very exciting news that we can share is that we have done a Series B funding here at Madrid. So that's going to give us quite a bit of leverage to be able to expand the work that we're doing, both in Open Rewrite and Modern, attract some new folks and talents, and further dive into dedicated topics like security. So if you're curious to know our plans for all of that and AI and everything coming up, then be sure to check out the TechCrunch article and what it links out to. So very, very pleased to have that. So then beyond that, we're going to look ahead to a couple of events in the coming weeks and months. So first off, we finalized the program for the Code Remix Summit. So if you want to see all these fantastic speakers in Miami in May, then be sure to check out the Code Remix Summit. And if we have a banner, I think we can share a code where you can get 50% off on your registration ticket. So tickets are selling out, so be sure to check that and use the discount while it lasts. So really look forward to that. And like I said, you can still register on the screen here. So I'll share this tab with you, and then you can check that out. Now, closer to the current date is that there's going to be a couple events before the end of the month. The first one being next Tuesday, where Merlin is going to present at the Java user group in Saarland on Open Rewrite and migration engineering. This is going to be a German language presentation, so if you're near, you can speak reasonably enough German, then be sure to check it out. If you're, however, more inclined to listen to a talk in English, then you can do so at the Toronto Java user group. So that's at the February 27th, where Jonathan will be presenting on the state of AI and large-scale automated refactoring. Which On the same day, there is another presentation, this time by our wonderful Justine, at the Confu conference in Montreal. She'll be presenting on transforming code with AI-assisted refactoring with OpenReward. So be sure to check that out as well.
I just saw a presentation Justine gave on AI subjects just earlier today, and it was very impressive. Unfortunately, she was at the time speaking in French to French customers of ours, so I didn't understand very much of what was going on, but it was excellently presented. So I'm assuming that the content is also really good when you understand what the words are.
I can imagine the challenges there. I mean, I followed along to presentations on Open Rewrite in French, and knowing a bit of French and a lot of Open Rewrite, it's easy. But with the groundbreaking stuff that Justine is doing, I imagine it's a challenge
I
when
could pick up
both are
words
needed.
like method declaration. Those came through.
Those always like sound familiar. I think, oh yeah. Now I know 10% of this sentence. But yeah, be sure to check out Confu if you're interested in one. And then right the day after, she's doing yet another session. So the folks over there are quite lucky to have her. That one is on efficient code searching for large code bases. So check out the Confu conference. There's a ton of good speakers, but I'm very pleased to have just joined their ranks. Now, slightly further out, there's 1 week after that, there'll be a workshop at DevNexus. Migration engineering with Open Rewrite, the recipe for success. So if you want to learn on how to use Open Rewrite to do all the things that are you up to now had painfully been doing by hand, then be sure to check out that session as well. I'll be there as well, helping out, and then look forward to see you there. And we also have a promotion code that we can share for DevNexus. So if you want to get your tickets at a discount for DevNexus, then be sure to check out the ticker that's moving across the screen right now. Now, folks there are lucky because we're also going to have Justine there. So if you want to see yet another talk, this one on AI's big leap from sidekick to autonomous multi-repo refactoring powerhouse, then you can see that session there. And believe me when I say it's not easy to give 3 different sessions within a week, but Justine is going to manage just fine because we know her. She does this quality work, do everything that she does. So be sure to check that out over there. Now, also new in the past weeks is that we crossed the 3,000 recipes mark. We've been moving up to it slowly over time, but it's very exciting to have this. I mean, I think we've doubled twice or 3 times since I first heard about Open Rewrite 3 years ago. So it's really neat to see just 3,000 recipes now, 3,000 individual automations that you can apply to your code to help automate everything that you want to do.
It'd be neat if we had historical data on what the recipe count has been. We don't, but we potentially could assemble it from Git. It'd be neat to figure out what period over which the recipe catalog is doubling, and whether that trend is accelerating or constant or what have you.
Yeah. I think we added it from recent versions onwards. We're going to maintain the number of recipes in the docs. So if you go to docs.openrewrite.org, you can see how many recipes we have, because we tend to forget how many we had at any one point until we're surprised that we're past 3,000. I mean,
when we were around like 2,900, I was just sure that we had already crossed 3,000, and I was like, did some recipes disappear? I could swear we were over this line, but I'd just been anticipating it so eagerly.
Yep. So very, very exciting to have these available for you to work around with. And then part of that effort is that we added recipes to upgrade to Spring Boot 3.4. So those are available if you use the Modern platform, or if you use the Modern CLI, you can use these recipes to upgrade your applications to Spring Boot 3.4. And we'll also expand these when Spring Boot 3.5 comes out near May of this year. So that's and included in this is also the associated recipes to go to Hibernate 6.6, Spring Cloud 2024, Spring Frameworks, and all the other components that make up that recipe.
Oh, Tim, we got a question for you coming from Kevin, wondering what your record for talks in a week is. I'm gonna guess. I think you've probably had a week where you had 5 talks in it. One talk per weekday.
I not like probably I have to say at this point. I know I did three in one day. That was
Three
kind
in one
of
day.
that was kind of intense.
Yeah.
But I that also meant that I've completely forgotten what else I did that week. So
Oh,
it could very well be
absolutely.
that week. Uh,
Yeah, and it wouldn't be hard if you, particularly if you count this. I mean, doing a code remix stream, I think counts as a talk, even if it isn't, at a Java user group or a conference or something. So if that's one for code remix, then if you had one other day where you were traveling and doing 3 presentations, yeah, 5 might be a low
uh,
estimate actually.
I mean, it is. If you look at my calendar alone, there's so many presentations I'm giving. Just not all of them in a public forum.
That's
I
true.
did.
That's true.
Yeah, I did 2 hours of presenting just this Monday at a Java user group. So it's very. I know. I like telling folks about Open Rewrite, and I've been doing so for 3 years now, and celebrating
Did
2 years
you,
that we're doing.
when you went into your engineering education, did you anticipate so much public speaking as being like really a cornerstone of your career?
Absolutely not. I think I went into computer science because I like computers more than I liked folks at the time. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know, that's kind of switched around. It's just I very much like the
Yeah.
social parts now.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I always like personally find it most motivating to work on an issue when I like know the person that issue is affecting, and can be like, it's not just fixing the technical problem, it's fixing this problem for Raj or for Stefan or
Oh,
for Tim, and then I
absolutely.
just get so much more of a feeling of satisfaction when I complete that.
Absolutely. And yeah, the problem there is having a large network where you kind of want to help everyone. And then,
It can get overwhelming.
but yeah. So, no, so that is, I think, most of what I wanted to cover in things new in the past week. We did also do a new release of Open Rewrite last Friday. So if you haven't yet, check that out. Then be sure to look at the link that I'll share in chat just now, where you can see that we have that total of 3,041 recipes as of last week. And mind you, we added 5 in just the past couple of days then. And you can see that we're adding over 100 recipes since the last release 2 weeks ago. So I would say that is quite accelerating
It's
over
pretty good. It's pretty good.
there. So yeah, that's it in terms of updates over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and which kind of brings us to today's topic of improved Lombok support. Tim and myself and several others have been, working on making Lombok not only work but work well. Longtime viewers or listeners of Code Remix might recall a presentation. I don't even want to say how long ago, where I announced that we had Lombok support, and we did kind of. It was the kind of support where it's like, okay, I've implemented it. Now all that remains is actually making it work in all the circumstances that it needs to. And kind of a key barrier which emerged, we realized, to the Lombok support being something we could turn on by default everywhere, was that there was a small bug in Lombok, which was utterly inconsequential for any usage except ours, basically, where the Java compiler maintains a position table of each AST element. And as we in Open Rewrite are converting the Java compiler internal AST into the Open Rewrite LST, we sometimes look at that position table in order to figure out where an LST element or where an AST element is located in the source code, so that we can grab the right comments and white space and everything to associate with it in order to create this format preserving representation. And the challenge is that sometimes Lombok would, when it ran, result in some inaccurate entries in the pos table, so that we would parse stuff all screwed up if Lombok was in use in such a way that it resulted in the pause table being messed up. And we actually had that bug in Lombok fixed by an Open Rewrite community contributor, and that was a pretty cool thing, because I was not looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and plumbing into the Lombok code. Just figuring out how to appropriately load the Lombok classes so that our Java parser could get access to them had been an exercise in reverse engineering. So it was really cool that fix got made by someone other than me. It's always a nice thing when a fix I want just happens, you know.
It was Ansuman Mishra who helped out there, really diving deep in both Open Rewrite and the Lombok code there. So
Yeah,
very,
he
very much
definitely demonstrated
appreciated.
some engineering chops there.
Yeah.
But so now we were in the position of waiting for Lombok to do a release that included that fix, so that we could use it. But with us already having chosen the topic for this week's presentation to be Lombok, we decided that we couldn't wait anymore, because we wanted to get this working for all of you finally. So we, rather than waiting for a new Lombok release to happen that would have that fix, we went and published our own jar that has that fix to Maven Central. So just until Lombok does their own release with that fix, there is the one and only, I hope, orked at openrewrite.tools release of Lombok now on Maven Central, which has allowed us to get a lot of that stuff in the Java parser working. Now, we probably still have to release a few things, Tim, right? Like we still have to release like the CLI with the Gradle and Maven plugins that have this fix, but we should already be able to demo some of the goodness that this will enable. In Rewrite Migrate Java, there are already quite a few recipes that involve adding or improving your usage of Lombok throughout your code. And now with Lombok support in the Open Rewrite in the Open Rewrite parsers, or at least asterisks for the very next release of Open Rewrite that Tim and I are going to go do probably right after this call. We'll finish that up. Or I actually bet that Tim, you're probably doing that right now while I'm talking, right?
I'm eyeing it. Yeah, that's
right on. Is that the Rewrite Migrate Java module has several recipes in it already for using various Lombok features where applicable, and with the appropriate support and the Open Rewrite parser for this, using this won't mess up your type attribution. Since if you'll recall, or maybe hear for the first time, the challenge that we always had with parsing files that had Lombok annotations was that before we had support in the Java parser, we would not be running the annotation, the Lombok annotation processor, and so the Java compiler would not be able to type attribute any methods that it would have generated were it to have run, which meant that all throughout an Open Rewrite LST that had that represented a file that had invocations of Lombok generated methods, those would just not be type attributed, which would lead to, in many ways, recipes not working as well as they should. And then, even if you had imagine you're calling like a Lombok getter on some class and then chaining additional methods off of that. Well, even the methods that weren't Lombok generated, might not end up being type attributed because it couldn't figure out, the type of the thing you were calling the method on originally. So anyway, all of that is getting resolved now. And I think in this next release, Lombok support is going to be turned on by default for Java 21, 17, and 11, and not yet 8, right? So if you were on Java 8, well, go upgrade to Java 11 or 17 first, which Open Rewrite should make very easy for you to do. With an asterisk.
It's our little nudge to get folks off of 8. Like if we make it too easy.
If it's too comfortable to stay on Java 8, why would anyone ever leave? Aside from multi-line text blocks or multi-line strings. That's the real killer feature of Java 17, if you ask me. I hate having to concatenate individual strings to get a text block. So anyway, so now that we have all of this good Lombok support, I thought I would run our Lombok best practices recipe on our own open rewrite repositories. Since we have long been Lombok fans and users, it only makes sense. And if we just start getting in here and clicking around, we see that some of the goodness that this will do is get rid of those basic getters in favor of the getter annotation. And Tim, I think we're later gonna a little later on in this presentation look at a recipe you mentioned that would further notice that, hey, if all the fields on this class have a getter annotation, you could remove that and put it on the class. That recipe isn't merged yet, right?
No. So we have a enthusiastic community user, Timo A, who has been writing recipes to do this type of work. And
Nice.
As best we could, we merged the first ones already, and we're gonna incrementally add the next ones too, because the silly thing is this was not blocked on the parser support, because of course
Right.
for us it's just source code with some annotations that we're adding. But just to get those PRs in, we didn't want to break stuff downstream. You can see a really neat change here where you'll have just a simple logger, and there's no need to be explicit. You can remove all those imports, use that SLF4J annotation, and what you then get is just the same thing you had before.
It looks like we could probably also remove this annotation, right? There's no logger type
Probably,
appears in this
yeah.
file anymore. We could probably remove that one as well. One really nice thing about this recipe is I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've definitely done this before, where rather than type out this whole private static final logger log equals logger factory get logger class name, I definitely copied and pasted that from one class to another, and then forgot to update the name of the class in the get logger method call, and inadvertently confused confused my log output in so doing. And so one really nice thing about this SLF4J annotation is you can't mess that up, because because Lombok isn't going to make a copy and paste error the same way that an inattentive human with their attention split between a dozen Slack pop-ups and calendar reminders and everything else that you might be trying to do might be understandably prone to making. So yeah, I think we may have to open up some mass PRs to our own open rewrite repositories with these Lombok best practices very soon. As these are some really nice changes that I'm seeing overall. Although now that I'm thinking about it, what are all of these log statements doing? Where are we doing all this logging? Archive
This is
analyzer.
something I think is coming from external.
Oh, it's a test resource. Okay, that's fine. I was like, on one hand, I was like, it's great that you improved the logging here, but on the other hand, I was like, wait, Open Rewrite is a library. No one likes receiving log messages from the library they use. Why do we have SLF4J or log4j usage in there at all? But if this is in a test resource, that's great. That's well and good. Yeah, all of you, I've definitely used some libraries before where I'm like, man, this is a really cool library. And then I go and look at my application's logs or my console output, and I'm like, why is there all of this garbage in my log output now? And I have to go figure out the appropriate configuration to try and filter out all those things I'm not interested in. So yeah,
and it's one of those cascading problems where you then have to figure out like upgrading the disks or your logging storage system, and it's just...
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely had an operational issue or two in the past where logs filled up all the available disk space in some long-running process. So be careful with logs. They're a useful tool, but they're not free. It's kind of like it reminds me of tests and unit tests in that way. Tim, have you ever worked somewhere where you're like, wow, these tests have negative ROI? I've had the experience of coming into an organization, and I'm not going to name any names since I'm essentially complaining about the engineering practices here, even if the information I'm describing is now like 10 years out of date. But at the time when I joined that org, I was asked to work on tests for a Java server application, and I go and look at the test base, and there's thousands and thousands of tests, and they're almost all end-to-end tests that require the whole running server with a real database, then go use like Selenium or some other headless browser thing to go actually click buttons in the UI. And this company was in a period of rapid growth, adding a bunch of employees, doing major moves in the code base. So predictably, half of these tests were failing on a good day, right? And so it was like what's the quality of the software at this moment? You might as well have like scried chicken bones or tea leaves or something for all the information that Test Suite was providing you. And so logs like tests are valuable and powerful things, but you shouldn't ignore that they're not zero cost, right? And sometimes the cost can exceed the benefit you're getting from them, and you should consider deleting that shit.
It's I've in the past had to like figure out like which of these are failing, and then retry just the failing tests and retry do 3 iterations of that, and then you're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just great to see how much you can clear out, because code that's just not there, it can't contain any bugs, which is.
It's true. It's true. The fastest and least buggy code is the code that doesn't exist at all. You have to have code to have bugs, and so that's one of the nice things about these changes. Yeah, definitely seeing some opportunities in this class for consolidating getters and setters up to the class level, and that'd be a good one. Yeah, look at all these methods that could be deleted. It's nice to have a recipe that deletes more lines of code than it adds. It's been a point of pride for some of the best engineers I've known when they're like, hey, over the last year of my contributions, I have removed more lines than I have added, and everything still works. And if you could make that claim, like you're doing something right.
And of course, this is the type of change that you're never going to get time for if you need to apply it, and you're also it's very prone to issues if you're to do it manually. So it's very good to have a recipe that you fully trust to do this type of work.
Yeah, there's a contribution graph for where's the
that's under top right, insights, I think.
Insights, that's right. Because we had all of these. Was there workflows repositories? I wanted maybe it's just look on the OpenRate repository. I think for a long time Jonathan had a lot more more deletions than additions. Anyway, I'll figure out where that chart was later. But I was just curious if he was still more negative than positive on lines of code added. So if you're a Lombok user, check out these recipes. Consider contributing. I think there's some of the things that are coming up on for Lombok recipes or haven't been implemented yet are things like using the data or maybe even the value annotation where appropriate. Using equals and putting on the equals and hash code annotations. And so altogether, if you're using Lombok, these recipes could be a powerful way to get the most out of it and to delete a bunch of code that you don't need next to that annotation processor.
And then a neat addition, because these are recipes to further your adoption of Lombok. If you already have a Lombok and you want to expand it and throw away all the boilerplate, it's also perfect for a project that's not using Lombok at all yet, and you want to introduce it and just clear things out and focus on the things that are then divergent, that are not a regular getter, not a regular setter. But we also have.
Do we have a recipe for adopting Lombok for a project that isn't already using it?
That would just be the best practices recipe.
Does it add it if it's not already there?
That is a good question, but
I don't think it. Well, maybe this migrate Lombok. Share my screen again. Let's migrate Lombok to Java 11 compatible version. Yeah, this will upgrade dependency version. Now we don't have a recipe for adopting Lombok in a process that doesn't, or in a project that doesn't already have it. But maybe we should, because that could be really that could be really powerful for people and not too difficult. It's like what, an add dependency to annotation processor, and then the best practices basically. Yeah.
Your only challenge would be finding a precondition that correctly works. So you could have a precondition that checks if any of the recipes is making a change or from the best practices and then run itself. Because you don't want to
That's
add Lombok if you don't have any getters at all.
that's
And nothing else.
true. That's true. It honestly sounds, I mean, the challenge kind of there is that we don't have a concept of a repository level precondition uh, anymore. Or we haven't since rewrite 8. And that's something that I've thought about trying to figure out how we could add that back in. Because there's like several recipes that are like scanning recipes that wouldn't need to be scanning recipes if something essentially did the scanning on their behalf. Um, so maybe repository level preconditions will be something I can go implement and have a future Code Remix Weekly subject on. In this case, without it, you could definitely do an ad hoc recipe pipelining kind of exercise where you first like do like here's how I might approach this right now. If I had a big old code base and I'm like I want to use Lombok, but only in places where it's applicable, I might start off by doing like a find method usages for getters, or maybe not even find method declaration. It would be better. And I guess we can use 2 dots as a wildcard, including for the name of the class, and then I could be like get star like this. Would this work? Let's try this. If I run this on open, no, cannot start with dot dot. Okay, well,
Yeah, so
wait,
then
I
star
can do
dot
star
dot
dot dot. That
star.
should be fine. Star dot dot star. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's try that. Is if this is, okay, cool. We are getting some results. So yeah, so if you have some methods that are getters, now the challenge is that this find method declaration is not enough on its own to say the implementation of that getter is only returning a field. But we could make a recipe that looked at the method body for getters and setters, and if it found any, was like, okay, you could use some Lombok in your life, and then we just need a repository level precondition, or even not a repository level precondition, but if you just had a recipe that found Lombokable things, you could run a recipe on all of your repositories, and then, and this is a cool thing you can do in the UI of like the SaaS, and then all the ones that have results, you can go create a user organization for just those repositories. And then in the next recipe run, even if you don't have a notion of a repository level precondition, you've then created the curated list of repositories where the recipe will be applicable. So yeah, I think in the future we will have 2 features that we don't have right now that would make writing that more possible, and that is repository level preconditions and recipe pipelining, because you could kind of emulate repository level preconditions with recipe pipelining, even if you didn't have that notion otherwise. And what I mean by recipe pipelining is run not just one recipe or one composite recipe with a bunch of things under it, but run one composite recipe and in some way use the output of that recipe, probably in terms of, it's some mixture of the altered LST, search results, and data tables it produces as inputs into a subsequent recipe run to target or refine or provide that subsequent recipe run with additional information. And that's kind of vague because that feature is not fully designed yet, but it's something we've been talking about for years, and actually has some really broader or more interesting use cases than that. Because if you imagine like doing a like true like data flow analysis that didn't stop at the edge of a repository, you could like one of the challenges of doing that right now is different code in different repositories can call each other back and forth, and the data flow tools that exist today mostly are not going to be able to like make that jump. But if you have a data table of what all the method calls are across, what all the repositories you look at, you could use that as the input to a data flow analysis or taint tracking recipe, and then get true multi-repository data flow analysis and taint tracking, which could be really powerful for many forms of analysis, really powerful for security analysis. Like if you're looking for where some untrusted like user data might, or data that's like coming in from a form or from outside the system, where that flows not just through the code in one repository, but through your entire code base. So anyway, that's a little off the subject of Lombok, but we're always kind of cooking
Yeah.
on new ideas to make Open Rewrite and Modern just the most powerful possible tool for seeing and understanding and changing your code bases at scale.
And hearing you talk about this use case, I think what we would want in this specific case is run all the Lombok recipes, and if any of them made a change,
Yes.
then run a subsequent recipe.
Yeah, I think so. I think
that
that
is,
would be better. That would be better than just like the find method usages thing that I just did, since that was imprecise compared to the Lombok recipes themselves. But yeah.
And then something like not a precondition, but an after if match then construct. We'll refine this in some future session. Yeah.
For sure. So I don't know, Tim. Let's see. Do we want to look at any of the recipes that are kind of in progress related to Lombok on Rewrite Migrate Java? I don't know if we want to live code on them or just kind of like show what's coming up. What are you feeling like?
So one thing I would like to very briefly touch upon is that the parser support that we now have also enables use cases for existing recipes. So we have an unauthored recipe for the parameterizing logging statements, which, if you recall, what it does is you have some kind of silly login statement which does string concatenation, and the goal is to have it use those parameterized logging statements here to pass in those arguments. Now this is a recipe that has not been altered at all, but by adding Lombok support in our parsers, it now also works for logging fields that are generated by this annotation processor from Lombok. So
this is a really good example of what lack of Lombok support would do to recipe runs, since if before we had Lombok support, the parser would look at this as just a straight Java file. What you see is what you get, and what you see is referring to a field named log that isn't declared anywhere. So the Java compiler understandably is like, what the hell is this log field? I don't know what that is. Why are you trying to ask me to type attribute this? Go fix your code, dummy. So now that we actually have the Lombok support, this recipe will have the type attribution it needs to do the thing that it was always supposed to do.
Yep. So that also means that you can go back to the recipes you already run them again on your code, and now it will pick up the things that we had missed previously due to missing type information. And not a week has gone by since I've joined Modern that I have helped remind folks on the potential of missing type information and to negatively affect our recipe runs.
It comes up a lot in the community Slack's question sections because it's an invisible thing. It's a metadata thing, and it's like my code snippet is right. Why isn't the recipe doing what I want it to do? And it's like, well, one, is the code snippet right? Maybe often missing an import. Like, did you supply a class path to the parser so that it could type attribute the thing? Yeah, absolutely.
And one silly thing that I personally am looking forward to is that we now just get to use Lombok annotations in our tests as well. So whenever you're
That's true.
throwing up some kind of like silly DTL object and you just want to have some getters on it, then just throw a data on it like you would anywhere else. And it'll just
It's really nice when you can keep an open rewrite test terse enough that it all fits on one screen, both the before and the after. So any tool that helps you to keep things concise and clear, like Lombok, can make for tests that are easier to read and understand, which I think goes back to our earlier conversation about how tests can verge into having negative value. keeping your tests as easy to read and understand as possible is a kindness not just to yourself, but whatever poor schmuck in the future is going to be looking at all the failures in a test pass for a test that they did not author or didn't author recently enough to remember, and to have to make sense of that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just one example, and a lot more recipes are going to benefit from this. There'll be recipes related to removing your constructors in Spring applications, all things that are just gonna start working. So
Yeah, I was just talking just this last week with a customer who was running like the find sensitive API endpoints recipe,
Oh, yeah.
and was like, hey, I found a case where this not returning a search result where I see clearly in the code a place where it should, and I scrolled up on the class and like, oh, there's a bunch of Lombok annotations. That's
Yep. There
why
you
this
go.
method didn't end up getting type attributed. So I'm looking forward to fewer investigations for literally any recipe that could be traced back to missing type attribution from Lombok annotations.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good
So yeah,
stuff.
that's
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, that's one that I wanted to show, and then we can also briefly maybe explore some of the recipes that have made it into the Lombok best practices, and then there's some further
Good idea.
recipes that won't make it into the best practices because they're somewhat opinionated, and of course we only want to run stuff that is very likely to get merged. So whenever it's maybe not something that you can run without supervision, we won't put it in the best practices, but it's still worthwhile to check to see which recipes we have. So I'm just gonna show you the test, I think, first, because I always like to just have a very clear example of what this is intended to do. And in this case, yeah, one of the recipes is already doing what you saw in the diffs that you showed, at scale through the platform. But this also goes to show that indeed we've tested it before we actually run it at scale. And then we are going to, in this case, remove a solely empty constructor with just a no args constructor annotation. And as always, invariants, things where you would not want to do it, that's also covered by tests, where if you are assigning a field to some default value, then very much don't make this a no args constructor. You're going to miss that assignment. And then further on, you want to be sure that your access level is maintained as well. So all kind of cases covered very helpfully by community contributor Timo A. And then let's jump to the recipe where you can see a bit of how that has actually been implemented. So you'll recognize the familiar structure. We extend recipe and we just have that visitor. And then there's not a real need for a precondition here because it's anything that has an empty constructor. So it's not something we can really optimize for.
Are you sure that recipe isn't part of the Lombok best practices already? I'm pretty sure
This one is.
Okay,
There's a few others that are not going to be part of that.
Gotcha. But you're not showing those yet. I understand.
No. And then in terms of implementation, it is fairly straightforward. We're just going to find any method declaration, and if it is a constructor and it has empty parameters and it has a body with no statements in it, so not that assignment to default variables, then we're going to replace it with a annotation added to the class itself. And for that, we're going to use this first and closing to get the class where it's actually defined, and then use that do after visit to actually add the annotation there.
We probably could. Yeah, this is good. We could take it a step further because that example you showed, that parameter initialization, that could still be moved to. I guess it could just be foo equals 7 in the online 61 of the class if we wanted to. Now that there's lots of like edge cases that come up if you start doing that. Yeah, exactly. That is a legitimate alternative to not making any changes. Now, where you could easily run into some challenges with that, and where the implementation could suddenly start to double or triple in length, was like if the parameters in the constructor were like assign A to 1 and then assign B to A, but then the fields were not in that order. If you just naively tried to copy those initializing statements, you might have to like reorder the fields in the class in order to make it all initialized right. So I think the current form of the recipe is good and justifiable, and we'll cover you in strikes a nice balance between keeping the implement being useful and keeping the implementation simple and bug free.
And it also means that if you run this in isolation, it's going to be very trivial to review because it's only going to do the stuff where it is actually boilerplate. There's no real other things worth evaluating. And then makes it a very clear-cut improvement. And then, as you've come to know, to insert that new annotation, we're going to use just the Java template builder. Give it an import and a class path to find that Lombok annotation. And then just apply it, add it to the class itself, and should be good. So that's really all you need for this particular recipe. And the fun thing is, this was possible already like half a year ago, years ago. But now that it's not going to mess up your type information, it's very helpful to run it these days. So then some other recipes that we have here. Let me try to find the one that is a lot more opinionated, which is not going to be part of the Lombok best practices, is this one to move over from a add value annotated class to a Java 17 record, or I think it's Java 14, 15 where records were introduced. So that is still something that is quite worthwhile, but it's going to be a tough one to fully adopt if you're not sure that you're not working on a library, because for a record, any time that you have a getter or a setter, you will lose that get or set prefix on the methods that it generates. So this is one that we don't quite recommend running without supervision. It can be very helpful to run if you know what you're doing and that it's applicable to the project that you're working on. But it's not going to be an automatic thing that we suggest for the best practices recipe.
With this kind of brings me back to what we were just saying about recipe pipelining, where right now, like if you have a recipe that changes a public method signature in one repository, and then you have some other repository that's calling that method, like if we had recipe pipelining that supported like if we had recipe pipelining, like you could have a recipe that renames a method in one repository, and then in the next stage of the pipeline updates all downstream repositories to use that new method name. Kind of like how you can rename a method in your IDE and have everything updated in the current repository, just like extending that to work across multiple repositories. So that's a dream I have for open rewrite recipe capabilities.
Yeah, it's I think we're finding more and more power that we could add to our tools, and then of course the challenge is to educate folks on all those possibilities. And a lot of these can be achieved with like you showed, like do a quick search, then go to user organization and do it that way. I think that pattern is something that we know about, that we can educate folks about. And if we were to bundle that up in something of a built-in experience, then we have to educate folks on that as well. Yeah. But then, would be interesting to run this indeed, and then fix all the issues downstream as well. But I think for now, it's safest to not run that particular recipe just by default when you run your best practice. Then one recipe that we discussed earlier on is this one, to pull up the Lombok getters and setters. When every field has been annotated with @getter, it might make sense to move that to the class itself. So you can see here that we have let's close the sidebar. We have a class, it has a single field, it has the getter annotation, and you might then want to pull up that getter into the class itself. Similarly, if you have some additional methods, then you want to do that. If you have more than one field, you might also want to do that, but There's also cases where you might not want to have that. If you have only one of the two fields annotated, then you should. And this all has already been implemented. It's just there's one nagging failure that stops us from merging this right now, which I still need to figure out and fix. And then we'll get this sorted as well and probably add it to the chain of recipe best practices for Lombok, such that you first replace each individual getter method, and then once you have annotations on your field, clear those out and move it to the class where we can. It's just the fun of chaining recipes and each handing off their output to the next one to eventually end up with something that maybe looks very different from what you had.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe you already have a test case for this on that recipe of. I have seen it before where you have like the getter annotation on a class and also still the getter annotation on a field in that class, which is totally redundant, and that could be removed. I wonder if the recipe covers that as well.
It's an interesting case. I think probably a good one to add before we merge. And then there's also mismatches that you could have in the arguments for each of those getter annotations.
Very true.
One might be public, the other one might be private, or the other
Oh,
way
that's
around.
smart. That's smart. Yeah, you can't move them all to the class if they have different visibilities.
It's been I've been doing reviews for like 2.5, 3 years now, and it's always this adversarial thinking, like how can I break this? Because I know
Good
lot of
test
developers.
engineering,
Yeah.
of doing that fully disjunctive reasoning of like, what are all the possibilities, and what are all the possibilities that this is not covering? Yeah, coding for the happy path is a great way to have lots of bugs.
Yeah. So no, it's a ton of fun to just, I don't know, make that part of the challenge, and then ask the folks involved if that is something that they hope to help fix themselves, or get suggestions on fixing, and then take it from there. And I don't know, that's always a fun bit of challenge. That's the neat thing of doing those code reviews for the wider community.
Well, good stuff, Tim. I guess all that's left is kind of to remind people that they should definitely join us at the Code Remix Summit. And if you want to write some recipes or fix some recipes you have written, and you're like, oh, there's too many bugs, this is too hard, I don't want to deal with it myself. At the Code Remix Summit, you could bring your recipe to Tim and I and be like, fix this for me, please, and we obviously will.
Yeah, it's, to the best of our abilities, or
To the best of our abilities.
It's very hard with a lot of this work not to get like sidetracked and think, oh, this is a neat rabbit hole, and then just
rabbit holes abound. It's a real challenge, I would say, with the technology in general of like, what could you do with Open Rewrite and Modern? It's like, what are all of the things that you would ever want to change about any code base, right? All of that is potentially in scope. So there's a truly epic number of rabbit holes that we could venture down. But obviously, we'll prioritize the rabbit holes that people bring to us in person at the Code Remix Summit.
And if you share your idea before I fly out, then you'll have some guaranteed 9 hours of me focus time, potentially working on your problem. So,
there you go. There you go.
Cheers. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining, and hope to see you all next week.
Thank you for joining, and thank you, Tim, for joining me here today, and for all of your hard work on getting this Lombok stuff working. This is a big advancement for us and for everyone.
Yeah, thank you as well. Like we've been handing off like back to back, and it's just a continuous work around the clock. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Good to have this in. So yeah, see you all soon. Cheers.
See you next week. Bye.